There are moments in life that split your existence into before and after. Moments so unexpected, so impossible, that they rewrite everything you thought you knew about yourself and the world. Emma Carter sat in the sterile examination room, the paper beneath her crinkling with every small movement, and heard words that made no sense, words that belonged to someone else's story, someone else's life. Congratulations, you're pregnant? But Emma had never been with anyone. She was 24 years old, a virgin by choice, by circumstance, by a combination of fear and a romantic heart that had been waiting for something real, something worth the vulnerability. And now, a doctor she'd never met before was smiling at her with professional warmth, talking about prenatal vitamins and first trimester precautions, while Emma's world tilted on its axis and refused to right itself. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and something floral, probably from the diffuser on the reception desk, a scent meant to calm, but that only made Emma's stomach turn. She'd come in for what she thought was a stomach bug, maybe stress from her final gallery showing at art school, the exhaustion that came from working 3 part-time jobs while trying to launch a career as a painter. She'd expected a prescription, maybe some advice about rest. Instead, she got a reality that couldn't possibly be real. "I don't understand," Emma finally managed, her voice small, fragile, like glass about to shatter. Dr. Martinez, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun, tilted her head slightly, concern flickering across her features. "The test is quite clear," she said gently. "Your HCG levels indicate you're approximately 8 weeks along. We'll schedule an ultrasound to confirm, but there's no doubt. You're pregnant." Emma's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs, feeling the rough denim of her jeans, needing something solid, something real to anchor her. "But that's impossible," she whispered. I haven't." The words died in her throat, heat flooding her cheeks. How do you explain to a stranger that you're still untouched, still waiting, still holding on to something the modern world seemed to consider antiquated? Dr. Martinez's expression shifted from professional to genuinely puzzled. She pulled her rolling stool closer, her voice lowering to something more intimate, more concerned. "Emma, I need you to help me understand. Are you saying you haven't been sexually active?" Emma nodded, unable to speak around the tightness in her throat. "Never?" "Never," Emma confirmed, and the word came out broken, desperate. "I don't understand how this is possible." There was a long silence. Dr. Martinez stood, moving to her computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard with sudden urgency. She clicked through screens, her face growing paler with each passing second. "Oh God," she breathed, and Emma's heart stopped. "What?" Emma asked, fear making her voice sharp. "What is it?" Dr. Martinez turned, and her professional composure had cracked, revealing something that looked like horror, like disbelief, like the kind of mistake that ended careers. "Emma, I need to make a phone call. Right now. Please wait here. Don't leave. Just wait." She practically ran from the room, leaving Emma alone with the sound of her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, with the impossible words still hanging in the air like smoke. Pregnant. Virgin. Impossible. Emma stood on shaking legs, moving to the window that looked out over the parking lot, over the ordinary world where ordinary things happen to ordinary people. She pressed her forehead against the cool glass, trying to breathe, trying to think. She'd been careful her whole life, careful with her heart, careful with her body, careful with trust. She'd watched friends give themselves away to people who didn't deserve them, watched relationships crumble under the weight of misplaced faith. So she'd waited. She'd chosen to wait for something real, something that mattered, someone who would see her, truly see her, and love what they found. And now this. Now an impossible pregnancy that made no sense, that violated every law of biology she understood. Her phone buzzed in her purse. 3 texts from her roommate asking if she was okay, if she wanted company at the appointment. Emma couldn't bring herself to answer. How do you explain something you don't understand yourself? The door opened behind her, and Emma turned. Dr. Martinez had returned, but she wasn't alone. A man in a suit, expensive, perfectly tailored, stood beside her. His face was grave, his expression controlled in a way that suggested years of practice hiding emotion. "This is David Chen," Dr. Martinez said, her voice tight. "He's the director of the fertility clinic associated with this hospital." Emma frowned. "Fertility clinic?" "I've never been to a fertility clinic." Mr. Chen stepped forward, his hands clasped in front of him, like a man about to deliver terrible news at a funeral. "Ms. Carter, I'm afraid there's been a catastrophic error. 8 weeks ago, you came to this hospital for a routine procedure, a minor ovarian cyst removal. Do you remember?" Emma nodded slowly. She'd been terrified, her first surgery, but it had been straightforward. In and out the same day. "During your procedure," Mr. Chen continued, his voice careful, measured, "there was a critical mistake made in our affiliated fertility lab. A specimen meant for an IVF patient was—" He paused, swallowing. "It was inadvertently used during your surgery." The room spun. Emma reached out, grasping the examination table to keep from falling. "What? What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Mr. Chen said quietly, "that you were artificially inseminated during your surgery. Without your knowledge, without your consent. Due to a labeling error, a specimen mix-up that should never have happened." Emma couldn't breathe. The words were coming at her but making no sense, like a foreign language she'd never learned. "Who?" she managed. "Who's—" Mr. Chen and Dr. Martinez exchanged a glance. "The specimen belonged to one of our most prominent clients," Mr. Chen said. "He'd stored samples for future use. Given the circumstances, we're legally obligated to inform him." He pulled a folder from under his arm, opening it to reveal paperwork, forms, a name typed in bold letters at the top. Emma's vision blurred, then focused with painful clarity on that name. Dante Morrison. She knew that name. Everyone in the city knew that name. Dante Morrison, billionaire CEO of Morrison Industries, a man whose face appeared in business magazines and society pages, always alone, always composed, always untouchable. A man rumored to be cold, ruthless in business, and impossible to know. And somehow, impossibly, biologically, she was carrying his child. Emma's legs gave out. She sank onto the examination table, her hands moving instinctively to her still flat stomach, to the impossible life growing there. "This can't be happening," she whispered. "This can't be real." But it was real. As real as the paperwork in Mr. Chen's hands, as real as the baby forming inside her, as real as the name that would now be forever connected to hers. Dante Morrison. Emma had spent her whole life waiting for the right person, the right moment, the right story. She'd imagined how it would happen someday, with someone who loved her, someone who chose her. Instead, she got a medical mistake, a stranger's child, and a future she couldn't begin to imagine. The before was gone. The after had begun, and nothing would ever be the same. The law offices of Morrison Industries occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower that seemed to pierce the sky, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that caught the afternoon sun and threw it back at the world like a challenge. Emma stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to look up, feeling impossibly small, impossibly out of place in her thrift store dress and worn canvas shoes. She'd received the call 2 days after that devastating appointment, a crisp, professional voice informing her that Mr. Morrison requested a meeting, that his lawyers would be present, that she should bring any documentation she had. The voice had been polite but cold, the kind of cold that suggested she was a problem to be managed, a situation to be contained. Emma had barely slept since learning the truth. She'd lain awake each night, her hand on her stomach, trying to comprehend the impossible. There was a life inside her, a tiny, growing life that shared DNA with a man she'd never met, a man whose world existed so far above hers they might as well be living on different planets. She'd researched him, of course. Late at night, alone in her tiny studio apartment, she'd fallen down the rabbit hole of internet searches. Dante Morrison, 36 years old, self-made billionaire who'd built his tech empire from nothing. Graduated from MIT at 19, launched his first company at 21, sold it for millions at 23, and never looked back. The articles all used the same words: brilliant, ruthless, uncompromising, solitary. There were older photos from years ago, showing him with a woman, beautiful, elegant, always at his side at charity events and galas. Her name had been Isabel. Emma found the obituary from 4 years ago. Car accident. Isabel Morrison, beloved wife, talented architect, dead at 28. And after that, all the photos showed Dante alone. Always alone. Now Emma pushed through the revolving doors into the marble lobby, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the vast space. The security guard directed her to a private elevator, one that required a key card he provided, with barely a glance at her face. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement, just the slight pressure in her ears and the changing numbers above the door. 46th floor, 47th, 48th. When the doors opened, a woman was waiting, perfectly professional in a navy suit, her blonde hair in a flawless chignon. "Miss Carter," she said, her smile practiced, distant. "Mr. Morrison is expecting you. Please follow me." They moved through hallways, lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Emma would earn in a lifetime, past glass-walled conference rooms where serious people had serious conversations, until finally they reached a set of double doors, dark wood, imposing. The woman knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. Inside, the office was enormous, one wall entirely glass overlooking the city, the other walls lined with books and achievements that spoke of power, of success, of a life lived at the top. And standing at that window, his back to the door, was Dante Morrison. He was taller than she'd expected from the photos, broader through the shoulders, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her rent for 6 months. His hair was black, slightly longer than corporate standard, and even from behind, she could sense the tension in him, the controlled energy of a predator, deciding whether to attack or simply watch. "Ms. Carter is here," the assistant said quietly, and then she was gone, the door clicking shut with a finality that made Emma's heart race. For a long moment, Dante didn't move. He stood at the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at his empire, and the silence stretched until Emma thought she might scream just to break it. Then he spoke, his voice low, controlled, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been pain. It was hard to tell with men who'd learned to bury everything deep. "Tell me it's not true," he said. Emma swallowed hard. "I wish I could." He turned then, and Emma's breath caught. He was devastatingly handsome, the kind of handsome that belonged on screens and magazines, all sharp cheekbones and strong jaw, and eyes so dark they were almost black. But it was his expression that struck her, the absolute emptiness in his gaze, like he was looking at a problem to be solved rather than a person standing in front of him. The lawyers explained everything, Dante continued, moving to his desk but not sitting, just standing behind it like he needed the barrier between them. A catastrophic failure of protocol, multiple violations of medical ethics, my specimen used without authorization. His specimen. As if this baby, this impossible life, was just a transaction gone wrong. Emma felt anger flare beneath her fear. "This isn't exactly how I planned my life either," she said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "I didn't ask for this." His eyes narrowed slightly, the first sign of real emotion. "What do you want?" "Money. I'm sure that's what this is about. You'll sign an NDA, accept a settlement, and we'll never speak again." Emma stared at him, shock and fury warring in her chest. "Is that what you think? That I want your money? I didn't even know who you were until 2 days ago. I don't want anything from you." "Then what are you doing here?" Dante's voice rose slightly, the control cracking. "Why did you come?" "Because they told me I had to," Emma shot back. "Because apparently, when a medical facility destroys 2 lives with 1 mistake, there are legal protocols to follow. Because whether we like it or not, we're connected now. He started, then stopped, his jaw clenching. "We're nothing. This is a medical error. You'll be compensated. The pregnancy can be—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Emma felt ice flood her veins. "Can be what?" she asked quietly, dangerously. "Terminated," he said. "The word clinical. Empty. It's the most logical solution." Emma's hand moved to her stomach, protective, instinctive. "No. It's a cluster of cells," Dante said, and his voice had gone cold again, distant. "An accident. A mistake." "It's a baby," Emma said, her voice breaking. "My baby. Whether you want it or not, whether either of us planned it or not, it's real, and it's mine, and I'm keeping it." The silence that followed was deafening. Dante stared at her, something flickering in his eyes, something that looked almost like fear before it disappeared behind that impenetrable wall. "You don't know what you're doing," he said finally. "You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. You don't need this complication." "I'm 24, not a child," Emma replied. "And yes, this isn't what I planned. I was supposed to graduate, build my career, fall in love, do things in the right order. Instead, I'm pregnant with a stranger's baby because of a mistake that never should have happened. But it did happen, and this baby didn't ask to be created this way. So I'm making a choice. I'm choosing them." Dante turned back to the window, and Emma saw his reflection in the glass, saw the way his shoulders tensed, the way his hands clenched into fists. "I don't do children," he said quietly. "I don't do family. I can't." He stopped, and for a moment, just a moment, Emma saw something break in that reflection, something that looked like pain so deep it had no bottom. "Then fine," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You don't have to do anything. I'll figure it out on my own. I just wanted you to know. The lawyer said you had a right to know. So now you know." She turned toward the door, proud of herself for not crying, for not letting him see how much his coldness cut. But his voice stopped her. "Wait." Emma turned back. Dante was looking at her now, really looking at her, and she saw something shift in his expression, something she couldn't quite read. "You're really keeping it," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Emma said simply. Dante was quiet for a long moment, and Emma could almost see him thinking, calculating, trying to find the angle, the solution. Finally, he spoke. "I can't be a father. I won't pretend I can. But I'm not a monster. You'll have the best medical care money can buy, a place to live if you need it. financial support for the child. All I ask is that you sign an agreement giving me no parental rights or responsibilities beyond financial." Emma felt something twist in her chest, something that felt like disappointment, even though she'd expected nothing else. "You want to just pay me off and disappear?" "Not disappear," Dante said. "Just not be involved. It's better this way. Trust me." For a moment, Emma almost agreed. It would be easier, cleaner, to take his money and raise this baby alone, to never have to deal with this cold, damaged man who looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. But then she looked at his reflection in the window again, really looked, and saw what he was trying so hard to hide. He wasn't cold. He was terrified. "I'll think about it," Emma said quietly. And before he could respond, she walked out, leaving him alone in his tower, alone with his fear and his walls and his emptiness. And she wondered, as the elevator descended, if anyone had ever tried to climb those walls, if anyone had ever cared enough to try. 2 weeks passed before Emma heard from him again. 2 weeks during which she tried to build some semblance of normalcy around the chaos her life had become. She told her roommate, Sophie, who'd reacted with predictable horror and then fierce protectiveness, immediately offering to raise the baby together, to be the world's best auntie, to fight anyone who dared judge. Emma had smiled through tears, grateful for a friendship that didn't require explanations or justifications, just acceptance. She'd also called her mother, 3 states away, and that conversation had been harder, filled with the kind of disappointed silence that spoke louder than words. Her mother, a practical woman who'd raised Emma alone after her father left, had warned her about waiting too long, about being too romantic, about how the world didn't reward idealism. Now she just sighed heavily into the phone and said she'd send what money she could, which Emma knew meant sacrificing something her mother needed, and the guilt of that sat heavy in Emma's chest. But mostly, Emma tried to focus on her art. She was preparing for her first real gallery showing, a group exhibition featuring recent graduates from her program. She'd spent months on the pieces, large canvases that explored themes of isolation and connection, of the spaces between people and the bridges they built or burned. Now the work felt prophetic, like she'd somehow known her life was about to become a study in those very themes. She was in her studio, a converted garage she rented for almost nothing from an elderly artist who'd taken pity on her, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her swipe to accept. "Ms. Carter, this is Margaret Chen, Mr. Morrison's personal assistant. He'd like to meet with you." Emma's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't need another cold conversation in that sterile office, another reminder that to him, she was just a complication. But Margaret continued before Emma could speak. "He asked if you'd meet him somewhere neutral. There's a cafe on Madison, the Copper Kettle. Tomorrow at 10. Emma found herself agreeing, though she wasn't sure why. The Copper Kettle was nothing like she'd expected. No corporate gloss, no intimidating luxury. It was small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in local artwork. The kind of place where people actually talk to each other rather than staring at phones, where the coffee smelled real and the pastries were displayed under glass domes that had probably been there since the place opened. Emma arrived early, nervous, wearing her favorite dress, a soft green that made her feel braver than she was. She ordered chamomile tea, her new reality of no caffeine still feeling strange and restrictive, and chose a table by the window. She was watching the street, the ordinary people living ordinary lives, when Dante arrived. He was alone, no assistant, no lawyers, just him in dark jeans and a gray sweater that made him look younger, almost approachable. Almost. He saw her immediately, and something flickered in his expression before he masked it. He ordered at the counter, spoke briefly to the barista with an ease that surprised Emma, then joined her at the table. "Thank you for coming," he said, and his voice was different from their first meeting, quieter, less controlled. Emma nodded, wrapping her hands around her teacup for something to hold on to. "You said you wanted to meet somewhere neutral." "This is where I come when I need to think," Dante said, looking around the cafe with something almost like fondness. "It's one of the few places in this city where no one knows me, no one cares who I am. They just make good coffee and leave you alone." Emma studied him, this man who was connected to her in the most intimate way possible, without actually knowing her at all. He looked tired, she realized. There were shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw, and his hands, wrapped around his coffee cup, weren't quite steady. "I owe you an apology," Dante said suddenly, meeting her eyes. "The way I spoke to you in my office, the things I suggested, it was unconscionable. You're dealing with an impossible situation, and I made it worse." Emma hadn't expected that. She'd expected more coldness, more walls, not this raw honesty. "Thank you," she said quietly. Dante looked down at his coffee, and when he spoke again, his voice was so low she had to lean in to hear. "I told you I don't do children, that I can't. But I didn't explain why." Emma waited, sensing that whatever he was about to say cost him. "My wife," Dante began, then stopped, correcting himself. "My fiancée, Isabel. We were supposed to get married. We'd been together since college, built everything together. She was an architect, brilliant, creative. She saw the world as something to be shaped into beauty. I saw it as something to be conquered, controlled. Somehow we balanced each other." He paused, taking a breath that seemed to hurt. "We wanted children, started trying right after we got engaged. But there were complications. She had endometriosis, severe. The doctor said natural conception might be impossible. So we went to a fertility clinic. I stored samples, and she started treatments. We were hopeful." Emma's chest tightened, knowing where this was going, dreading it. But before we could start IVF, Dante continued, his voice empty now, emotionless in the way of someone recounting unbearable facts. "She was in a car accident. Someone ran a red light. She died instantly. And he swallowed. I was left with a collection of frozen samples that were supposed to create children with the woman I loved. Children I no longer wanted, because the only person I wanted to have them with was gone." The cafe sounds, the gentle murmur of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine, all faded into background noise as Emma absorbed this. "I'm sorry," she whispered, inadequate words for immeasurable loss. After she died, Dante said, "I shut down. I threw myself into work, built walls, made myself untouchable because feeling anything was unbearable. I thought about destroying the samples, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. They were the last piece of what we'd planned, the future we'd dreamed of. So I just left them there, frozen, forgotten." Emma understood now, the fear in his eyes, the cold rejection. "I'm not her," Emma said gently. "I know this baby isn't what you planned, isn't what either of us planned, but it exists, and I need to know. Are you going to try to take them from me? Because I'll fight you. I'll spend every penny I don't have fighting you if I have to." Dante looked up sharply, something like shock in his eyes. "Take them from you?" "No." "Emma, no, I'd never." He stopped, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look lost. "I don't want to take anything from you. I don't know how to be what this child needs. I don't know how to let myself care again." "Then don't," Emma said, surprised by her own words. "Just be there. Or don't. But if you're going to disappear, do it now. Don't wait until this baby knows who you are to decide you can't handle it." Dante was quiet for a long time, staring at his coffee like it held answers. Finally, he spoke. "When is your next doctor's appointment?" "Next week," Emma said warily. "Can I come?" Dante asked, and the vulnerability in his voice made Emma's breath catch. "I'm not promising anything beyond that. I don't know what I can offer. But I'd like to. I need to see. See that it's real." Emma wanted to protect herself, to refuse, to not let this damaged man into her life, only to have him leave when it got too hard. But she looked at his face, at the fear and hope warring there, and found herself nodding. "Okay," she said. "Next Thursday? 2:00. Dante nodded, something like relief crossing his features. "And Emma," she looked up. "I'm not trying to pay you off. I don't know how to do this, how to be close to someone again, how to let myself feel." "I know," Emma said softly. "That makes two of us." They sat in silence after that, not uncomfortable, just two people trying to figure out an impossible situation. Emma found herself studying him when he wasn't looking, noticing the way his jaw clenched when he was thinking, the way his fingers tapped against his cup in a rhythm that suggested music playing in his head somewhere. "You're an artist," Dante said suddenly, startling her. The assistant mentioned it. "She found your website." "Paintings." Emma felt herself blush, protective of that part of herself. "Yes." "They're beautiful," Dante said, and he sounded genuine. "Lonely, but beautiful. There's one, a woman reaching across a chasm. There's someone on the other side reaching back, but their fingers don't quite touch." Emma remembered that piece, one of her favorites, painted during a bout of insomnia and heartache over what felt like her inability to connect with anyone fully. "The space between," she said. "That's what I call that series. The space between what we want and what we have, what we feel and what we can say, what we are and what we show the world." Dante met her eyes, and for the first time, Emma saw him really see her, not as a problem or complication, but as a person, as someone who might understand things he'd never said out loud. "We're both standing in that space, aren't we?" he said quietly, reaching but not quite touching. Emma nodded, something shifting between them, not attraction exactly, but recognition. "Maybe," she said, "we can figure out how to bridge it. For this baby, if nothing else." "For this baby," Dante agreed. But his eyes said, maybe, just maybe, for more. The ultrasound clinic was in a newer building, all clean lines and soothing colors meant to put expectant parents at ease. Emma arrived 15 minutes early, her anxiety making her need to pace the waiting room, and she was surprised to find Dante already there, sitting in one of the plush chairs, staring at a magazine he clearly wasn't reading. He stood when he saw her, and Emma noticed he looked different again, more uncertain than she'd seen him. He wore dark slacks and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, no jacket, no armor, and there was something vulnerable about it that made Emma's chest tighten. "You came," she said, stating the obvious because she wasn't sure what else to say. "I said I would," Dante replied, and then added more quietly, "I almost didn't." "I sat in my car for 20 minutes trying to convince myself to leave." "What made you come in?" Emma asked. The technician called Emma Carter, and a woman appeared in scrubs covered with tiny cartoon babies, her smile warm and practiced. They both stood, and Emma saw Dante take a breath like he was preparing for battle. They were led to a small room with an examination table, an ultrasound machine, and a screen that currently showed nothing but black. The technician, whose name tag read Jennifer, explained the procedure with cheerful efficiency, gave Emma a gown to change into, and said she'd be back in 5 minutes. When the door closed, Emma and Dante looked at each other, suddenly hyper-aware that this was about to become real in a way that test results and medical files couldn't capture. "I'll step out," Dante said immediately, "while you change." Emma changed quickly, the paper gown crinkling with every movement, and called him back in, just as Jennifer returned with her clipboard and professional smile. "All right, let's see this baby," she said, dimming the lights. "You're about 10 weeks along now, yes?" Emma nodded, lying back on the table. Jennifer squeezed warm gel on Emma's still flat stomach, and Emma jumped slightly at the sensation. Dante moved closer without seeming to realize it, his eyes fixed on the blank screen like it might attack. "This might be cold," Jennifer warned, pressing the transducer against Emma's skin, moving it slowly, searching. For a moment there was only static, gray and white pixels that meant nothing. Emma felt her heart racing, sudden terror that something was wrong, that the baby was gone, that this whole impossible situation would end as mysteriously as it began. Then Jennifer smiled, stopping the wand's movement, and suddenly the screen showed something that took Emma's breath away. "There," Jennifer said, pointing. "See that flicker? That's the heartbeat." It was tiny, impossibly small, a flutter of light against darkness that pulsed with determined rhythm. Emma felt tears spring to her eyes immediately, unexpected, overwhelming. "That's the baby?" she whispered. "That's your baby," Jennifer confirmed, measuring right, on track. Good, strong heartbeat. Emma couldn't look away. She'd known, intellectually, that she was pregnant. She'd seen the test results, felt the nausea, the exhaustion. But this was different. This was a life, a person, someone who would exist because of a mistake neither of them had asked for. She looked at Dante, wanting to share this moment, and froze. He was staring at the screen with an expression Emma couldn't read, something between terror and wonder, his face pale, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands were fists at his sides, and she realized he was shaking. "Dante," Emma said softly, but he didn't seem to hear. "Everything looks good," Jennifer continued, oblivious to the emotional storm in the room. "Would you like to hear the heartbeat?" She didn't wait for an answer, just turned a dial, and suddenly the room filled with sound. A rapid whooshing, like galloping horses, like waves on a shore, like life itself demanding to be heard. It was the most beautiful sound Emma had ever heard. And then Dante made a noise, something between a gasp and a sob, and turned away. Emma's heart broke. She watched him walk to the corner of the room, his back to them, his shoulders rigid. Jennifer glanced at Emma, questioning, but Emma shook her head slightly. "Give him a moment." Jennifer nodded, professional enough to have seen all kinds of reactions, and quietly continued the examination, taking measurements, screenshots, murmuring reassurances that Emma barely heard because all her attention was on the man falling apart in the corner. When Jennifer finished, she said she'd give them privacy to get dressed, print the images, and return shortly. The door clicked shut, and Emma sat up slowly, still in the gown, uncertain. "Dante," she said, and her voice was gentle, the way you'd speak to something wounded. He didn't turn, but his voice came rough, wrecked. "I thought I could do this. I thought I could stay detached, just support you financially, keep my distance." Emma slid off the table, walked toward him, stopped just behind him, close enough to feel his warmth but not touching. "What changed?" "That sound," Dante said, and his voice broke completely. "That heartbeat. It was the same." Emma frowned. "Same as what?" "Same as when Isabel was pregnant," Dante whispered, and Emma went cold. We'd only gotten to see one ultrasound before the accident, just one. And I heard that heartbeat, and I was terrified and excited and so damn hopeful. And then 3 days later she was dead, and the baby was gone. And he stopped, his breathing ragged. He turned then, and Emma saw tears on his face, saw the grief he'd been holding back for 4 years spill over. "I can't lose someone again," he said desperately. "I can't let myself hope, and then have it destroyed. I can't survive it again." Emma understood then the real fear. It wasn't about not wanting the baby. It was about terror of attachment, of loving something that could be taken away. "No one can promise you that," Emma said honestly. "I can't promise I won't miscarry. Can't promise nothing will go wrong. Can't promise I'll be a good mother. Life doesn't come with guarantees." "I know," Dante said, wiping his face with shaking hands. "That's what makes it so terrifying." Emma took a breath, then did something brave, something that terrified her as much as it clearly terrified him. She took his hand. His fingers were cold, trembling, and for a moment she thought he'd pull away. But instead, he held on, gripping her hand like it was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop tilting. "I'm scared too," Emma said softly. "I'm 24. I have $300 in my bank account. I'm trying to launch an art career in a city that chews up artists and spits them out. I have no idea how I'm going to do this, and I'm so scared I'll fail this baby before they even get a chance." Dante looked at her, really looked at her, and Emma saw something shift. "You're not alone," he said, and it sounded like a promise, like a commitment he was making despite his fear. "I can't promise I'll be what this child needs. Can't promise I won't fail, but I can promise I'll try. I can promise I won't disappear." Emma felt tears on her own cheeks now. "That's all anyone can promise," she said. "To try." They stood like that, hands linked, two terrified people holding on to each other, because there was nothing else to hold on to. Then Jennifer knocked and entered with a folder of ultrasound images, and the moment broke. But something had fundamentally changed. They were in this together now, for better or worse. As they left the clinic, Dante insisted on walking Emma to her car, a battered Honda that had seen better decades. She expected him to leave then, to retreat back to his tower and his walls. But instead, he hesitated, his hand on her car door. "Emma, do you have dinner plans?" She blinked, surprised. "No, just going home to eat ramen and work on my paintings." "Would you?" He paused, looking uncomfortable in a way that was almost endearing. "Would you want to get dinner? With me? Not just to talk. About logistics. About what happens next." Emma studied him, this powerful man who was currently looking at her like he expected rejection, like he was waiting for her to say no, to push him away. She thought about saying yes, about opening herself to this, to him, and all the ways it could go wrong. But she looked at his face, saw the hope there, the tentative reaching across that chasm they'd talked about in the cafe. "Okay," she said, and watched relief flood his features. "There's a pasta place near my studio. Nothing fancy, but it's good." "Fancy is overrated," Dante said, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. A real smile that transformed his face, made him look younger, made her realize just how handsome he was when he wasn't hiding behind walls. Emma's breath caught. This was dangerous, this softening, this connection. But as she locked her car and they walked together toward the restaurant, their hands not quite touching but close, Emma thought maybe dangerous wasn't always bad. Maybe sometimes you had to risk the fall to find out if someone would catch you. Dinner became dinners. That first evening at the tiny Italian restaurant, with its red-checked tablecloths and candles stuck in wine bottles, they'd talked for 3 hours. About logistics, yes. About doctors and insurance and prenatal care. but also about other things. About Emma's art and the gallery show coming up. About Dante's company and the new technology they were developing. About their childhoods. Hers in a small town where everyone knew everyone. His in foster care until an older couple took him in at 14 and gave him the stability to excel. About books and music and the strange, isolated experience of living in a city of millions and still feeling profoundly alone. By the end of that meal, something had shifted. They weren't strangers anymore. They were two people slowly, carefully beginning to know each other, and it terrified them both. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Dante would text in the mornings, asking how Emma felt, if the nausea was better, if she needed anything. She'd respond with honesty, telling him about the exhaustion that made her feel like she was moving through water, the strange food aversions, the way her body was changing in small, constant ways. He'd show up at her studio some afternoons, bringing lunch, sitting quietly while she painted, not interrupting but just being present. Sometimes they'd talk. Sometimes they'd sit in companionable silence. And slowly, incrementally, the walls between them began to lower. Emma learned that Dante hated mornings, but forced himself to wake at 5 every day because discipline was how he'd survived. That he played piano but never performed, just played alone in his penthouse when he couldn't sleep. That he'd built his empire partly to prove something to the world that had thrown him away, but mostly because creating something from nothing made him feel real. Dante learned that Emma painted best at night, when the world was quiet and her thoughts could flow uninterrupted. That she'd chosen art not because it was practical, but because it was the only thing that made sense to her, the only language she fully understood. That she was brave in ways she didn't recognize, facing an impossible situation with grace and strength that humbled him. But neither of them talked about what was growing between them, the connection that had nothing to do with the baby and everything to do with recognition, with finding someone who understood what it meant to be afraid, to be wounded, to reach for something despite the risk. Emma's gallery show opened on a Thursday evening in early autumn, when the leaves were just beginning to turn, and the air had that sharp quality that promised winter. She'd been nervous for weeks, convinced no one would come, that her work wasn't good enough, that this whole dream was foolish. But the gallery was packed. Her professor had come, fellow students, even a few local art critics. And standing in the back, looking slightly out of place in his expensive suit among the bohemian crowd, was Dante. Emma hadn't invited him, hadn't wanted to burden him with her other world, her other dreams. But he'd come anyway, and when their eyes met across the crowded room, he smiled, and Emma felt something in her chest crack open. She made her way through the crowd, accepting compliments and congratulations, but her attention was fractured, aware of him watching her paintings, studying them with an intensity that made her nervous. "What do you think?" she asked when she finally reached him, standing in front of her largest piece. The space between, the woman and the figure across the chasm. He was quiet for a long moment, and Emma held her breath, suddenly desperate for his approval in a way that scared her. "It's heartbreaking," Dante said finally, "because you can see they want to reach each other. You can feel the longing. But there's all this distance, and neither of them knows how to cross it. That's everyone," Emma said softly. "We're all standing on opposite sides of chasms, reaching." "Not everyone," Dante said, turning to look at her. "Some people figure out how to build bridges." Emma's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "Are we?" she asked. "Building a bridge?" "I'd like to think so," Dante replied, and his hand found hers, their fingers lacing together, in a way that felt natural now, necessary. The show was a success. 2 pieces sold, and a local magazine wanted to feature Emma in their Emerging Artists series. She was floating, giddy with relief and joy and possibility. When the gallery finally emptied and the owner locked up, Emma and Dante walked through the cooling night, neither ready for the evening to end. They ended up at a small park near the river, sitting on a bench overlooking the water, watching the city lights reflect on the surface. "Emma," Dante said, and something in his tone made her turn. "I need to tell you something." Anxiety spiked through her joy. "What is it?" "I'm falling for you," he said, the words coming out rough, like they hurt. "And I don't know what to do about it because this is all backwards. We're having a baby together, but we're not together. We're building something, but I don't know what it is. And I'm terrified that if I reach for you, if I let myself feel this, something will go wrong and I'll lose you and the baby, and I won't survive it this time." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. She should be careful, should protect herself, should remember that this man was damaged and scared, and that getting close to him was dangerous. But she looked at his face, at the vulnerability there, at the fear and hope warring in his eyes, and she made a choice. "I'm falling for you too," she whispered, "and I'm just as terrified." Dante stared at her, shock and something like wonder crossing his features. "You are?" Emma nodded. "I didn't want to. I tried not to. I kept telling myself this was just about the baby, that we were just figuring out how to co-parent. But then you'd show up at my studio with lunch, or you'd text to check on me, or you'd look at my paintings like they mattered, like I mattered. And She stopped, tears suddenly blurring her vision. "I kept falling anyway." Dante reached up, cupping her face with both hands, his thumbs wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice raw. "Don't know how to let someone in again. Don't know how to risk my heart." "Neither do I," Emma admitted. "I've never been with anyone, never trusted anyone enough to try." "We're both disasters," Dante said, but he was smiling now, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed him. "Complete disasters," Emma agreed, smiling through tears. "Think we can figure it out together?" Dante asked, and his forehead touched hers, their breaths mingling. "I think we have to try," Emma whispered, "because I don't want to be standing on opposite sides of a chasm anymore. I want to build a bridge. I want to cross." "Then let's cross," Dante said, and he kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. But then Emma's hand slid into his hair, and Dante pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened, became something desperate, necessary, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Emma felt like the world had fundamentally shifted. "This is crazy," she said. "We barely know each other. We're having a baby. This is all backwards." "Completely crazy," Dante agreed. And yet, Emma repeated, and she kissed him again because she couldn't help it, because she'd spent her whole life being careful and cautious, and it hadn't protected her from anything. Maybe being reckless, being brave, being willing to fall. Maybe that was the only way to actually live. They stayed in that park until late, talking and kissing, and slowly, carefully, learning each other. Learning the taste of each other's mouths, the sound of each other's laughter, the way their bodies fit together like puzzle pieces that had finally found their match. And when Dante finally walked Emma to her car, he held her face one more time. "I'm still scared," he admitted. "Me too," Emma said. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe being scared means we're doing something that matters." Dante kissed her forehead, gentle, reverent. "It definitely matters," he said. "You matter. The baby matters. This, whatever this is, it matters more than anything has in a very long time." Emma drove home that night, with her hand on her stomach, with Dante's taste still on her lips, with hope blooming in her chest like flowers in unexpected soil. They were falling, both of them. And maybe, just maybe, they'd catch each other. The old man transitioned from two separate people figuring out co-parenting to two people actually together was both seamless and terrifying. They didn't discuss it formally, didn't define what they were. They just started existing in each other's spaces, more naturally, more necessarily. Dante began picking Emma up from her studio most evenings, not because she needed a ride, but because he wanted to see her, wanted those transition moments between work and home, where they'd talk about their days. Emma started keeping a toothbrush at Dante's penthouse, clothes in his drawers, her sketchbooks on his coffee table. Neither commented on it, both afraid that naming what was happening would somehow break the spell. But the pregnancy was progressing, and with it came changes that couldn't be ignored. Emma's stomach was beginning to show, a gentle swell that made everything undeniably real. She was 15 weeks now, past the dangerous first trimester, and her body was transforming in ways that both fascinated and frightened her. Dante was fascinated too, but in a different way. He'd stare at her stomach when he thought she wasn't looking, his expression unreadable. Sometimes he'd reach out like he wanted to touch, then pull back, uncertain. One evening, lying on his couch after dinner, Emma caught him doing it again. "You can touch," she said softly. He looked up, startled, guilty, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "Dante, it's your baby too," Emma said, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "You're allowed to feel connected to this." His hand was large and warm against her skin, and Emma watched emotions play across his face. "There's nothing to feel yet," he said. "Not yet," Emma agreed. "But in a few weeks they'll start moving. You'll feel kicks," the doctor said, around 18 to 20 weeks. Dante was quiet, his hand still resting on her stomach, and Emma saw something vulnerable in his expression. "What if I'm not good at this?" he asked quietly. "What if I fail?" "Then you'll be like every other parent," Emma said gently. "Everyone's terrified they'll fail. My mom was terrified. Your foster parents probably were too. But they tried anyway. That's all we can do. Try and love them and hope it's enough." Dante looked at her, and Emma saw tears in his eyes that he blinked away quickly. "I never thought I'd have this chance again," he admitted. "After Isabel died, I convinced myself I didn't deserve it. Didn't deserve family, didn't deserve love, didn't deserve anything good because I hadn't been able to save her." Emma's heart broke. "Dante, that accident wasn't your fault. You know that, right?" "Logically, yes," he said. "Emotionally, it's harder. I replay it constantly. If I'd driven instead, if we'd left 5 minutes earlier, if I'd insisted she work from home that day, all the ways I could have changed the outcome." "You can't live in the what-ifs," Emma said, shifting so she could look at him directly. "They'll eat you alive. Believe me, I know. I've spent weeks replaying every decision that led to this. What if I'd gone to a different hospital? What if I'd refused the surgery? What if I'd been more careful, more vigilant? But none of that changes where we are now." "You're right," Dante said. "Where we are now, with you, with this baby. It's the first time in 4 years I've felt like I might have a future worth looking forward to." They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the couch, his hand still on her stomach, both finding comfort and closeness, in not being alone with their fears. The weeks passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and late-night conversations, and Dante slowly, carefully learning to be present, to be vulnerable, to let himself hope. Emma's gallery show had led to commissions, actual paying work, and she'd been able to quit one of her 3 jobs. Dante had offered to support her financially, to let her paint full-time, but Emma had refused. Not because she didn't need the money, she desperately did, but because she needed to maintain some independence, some sense that she could stand on her own even as she leaned into him. They argued about it one evening, their first real fight. "It's not about charity," Dante insisted, frustrated. "It's about giving you time to focus on your art and preparing for the baby." "I can't just let you take care of me," Emma shot back. "I need to be able to support myself, support this baby. What if something happens? What if we don't work out? Then I'm trapped, dependent, vulnerable." "Nothing's going to happen," Dante said, but his voice was uncertain. "You can't promise that," Emma replied. "No one can. We've been together for what, 2 months? We're having a baby together, but we barely know each other. This could all fall apart." "Is that what you think?" Dante asked, and Emma heard hurt in his voice. "That this will fall apart?" "I don't know what to think," Emma admitted, suddenly exhausted. "I'm scared, Dante. I'm scared of depending on you and then losing you. I'm scared of letting myself believe this is real and then having it taken away. I'm scared of everything." Dante crossed to her then, pulling her into his arms, and Emma let herself be held, let herself be weak for a moment. "I'm scared too," he said into her hair, terrified. "But Emma, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here. I'm choosing to be here every day." "That doesn't mean something bad won't happen," Emma said, her voice muffled against his chest. "Life doesn't care what we want." "No," Dante agreed, "but we can choose how we face it. We can face it alone and scared, or we can face it together. And together has to be better." Emma pulled back, looking up at him. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know you're trying. I'm not used to letting people in." "Neither am I," Dante said, cupping her face. "So we'll figure it out. Together." The argument ended, not because everything was resolved, but because they were both exhausted and scared, and sometimes the only thing to do was hold on and hope the storm passed. The next doctor's appointment was the anatomy scan at 20 weeks, the big ultrasound where they'd check all the baby's organs, measurements, development, and where they could find out the sex if they wanted. "Do you want to know?" Emma asked Dante as they drove to the hospital. "I don't know," Dante said honestly. "Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to be surprised." "What do you want?" "I want to know," Emma admitted. "I want to be able to picture them, imagine their future, call them something other than the baby." "Then we'll find out," Dante decided. The ultrasound took longer this time, the technician methodically checking every organ, every measurement, explaining what they were seeing. The baby was active, moving constantly, and Emma laughed when a tiny foot kicked against the transducer. "They're feisty," the technician said, smiling. "Strong kicks for 20 weeks." Dante watched in fascination, his hand squeezing Emma's almost too tight. "Everything looks perfect," the technician said finally. "Would you like to know the sex?" Both Emma and Dante nodded. "It's a girl," the technician said, and Emma's world tilted. A girl? A daughter? She looked at Dante and saw tears streaming down his face, no attempt to hide them now. "A daughter," he whispered, and his voice broke completely. "Emma, we're having a daughter." Emma was crying too, overwhelmed, overjoyed, terrified. A little girl who would have Dante's intelligence and hopefully Emma's creativity. A little girl they'd have to raise and protect and love. A little girl who'd already changed everything. After the appointment, they sat in Dante's car in the parking lot, both too emotional to drive. "We need to talk about names," Emma said finally, "and living arrangements, and a million other things." "I know," Dante said. "But first, can we just sit with this? A daughter." "Okay," Emma agreed, and they sat in silence, hands linked, both imagining the future, the girl who'd be here in 20 weeks, the life they were building. "I want to ask you something," Dante said suddenly. "What?" Move in with me, he said. Not because you have to, not because of the baby. Because I want you there. Because I want to wake up with you every morning and go to sleep beside you every night. Because I'm in love with you, and I don't want to waste time being apart. Emma stared at him, shock and joy and fear warring in her chest. You love me? I love you, Dante confirmed. I think I've been falling for you since that first dinner. Maybe even since you stood in my office and refused to let me intimidate you. Emma, you make me want to be brave, want to be better, want to risk everything because you're worth it. Emma was full-on sobbing now, happy tears, overwhelmed tears. I love you too, she managed. And yes, I'll move in with you. Dante kissed her then, desperate and tender, and Emma felt something settle in her chest, something that felt like home, like safety, like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. They'd crossed the chasm, built their bridge, and now they were going to build a life, together, for their daughter, who was already loved beyond measure. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges, struggles, moments of doubt. But as they sat in that parking lot, crying and kissing and planning, Emma thought that maybe that was okay. Maybe life wasn't about certainty. Maybe it was about finding someone brave enough to stand beside you in the uncertainty and say, I'm scared too, but let's try anyway. And that was exactly what they were doing. Trying. Together. And it was enough. Moving into Dante's penthouse was surreal. Emma had lived in tiny spaces her whole life. Cramped studio apartments and shared rooms. Places where you could touch all four walls without taking a step. Dante's home was the opposite. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. An open floor plan that seemed to go on forever. Expensive furniture that looked like art and probably cost more than art. Her first night there, Emma stood in the middle of the living room feeling small and out of place, her boxes of belongings looking insignificant in all that space. You okay? Dante asked, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his hand settling on her growing stomach. It's a lot, Emma admitted. I keep expecting someone to tell me I don't belong here. You belong here, Dante said firmly. This is your home now. Ours. Emma turned in his arms, looking up at him. We need to make it feel like that then. Actually make it ours. Not just yours with my stuff invading. What did you have in mind? Dante asked. Emma gestured to the pristine white walls. Color, for one. Art? Your walls are so empty it's like no one lives here. Paint them? Dante looked around like he'd never considered it. I've never changed anything. The designer picked everything when I bought the place. That was 5 years ago, and I left it. That's depressing, Emma said. Come on. Tomorrow we're going to a paint store, and I'm bringing some of my paintings from storage. We're making this a home. Over the next few weeks, they transformed the penthouse. Emma painted an accent wall in the living room, a deep teal that caught the light beautifully. They hung her artwork, mixed with pieces they bought together from local galleries. They rearranged furniture to make conversation areas, cozy spots to read or talk or just be. And they began preparing the nursery. They'd chosen a room with eastern windows that got beautiful morning light. Emma wanted to paint a mural, something soft and dreamy that their daughter could grow up looking at. She sketched designs, while Dante researched cribs and changing tables and all the terrifying amount of things apparently required for a tiny human. One evening, Emma was standing on a step stool, carefully painting the outline of a tree on the nursery wall, when Dante came in, carrying takeout from their favorite Thai place. You're supposed to let me do the high stuff, he said, worry in his voice. I'm 3 months pregnant. Not incapacitated, Emma replied. But she stepped down anyway, accepting the food. Besides, I like doing this. I like creating something for her. He set the food on the floor, and they sat cross-legged like kids, eating pad thai straight from the containers, surrounded by paint supplies and partially assembled furniture. "What should we name her?" Emma asked. "We can't keep calling her and the baby." Dante was quiet, chewing thoughtfully. "What kind of names do you like?" "I like classic names," Emma said. "Names with history and meaning. Nothing too trendy." "I like that too," Dante agreed. "What about family names? Anyone you want to honor?" Emma thought of her mother, their relationship complicated but real. Marie was my mother's name, but I don't know if I want to use it. "What about from your side?" Dante went still, his expression closing off slightly. "I don't have family to honor. The Johnsons, my foster parents, they were kind, but we weren't close enough for that." Emma kicked herself mentally for bringing it up. "What about Isabel?" she asked quietly. "Would you want to use her name?" Dante looked at her, surprise, and something like pain crossing his features. "You'd be okay with that?" Emma reached over, taking his hand. "Dante, she was important to you. She was part of your life, your story. I'm not threatened by that. If you want to honor her memory, I think that's beautiful. But only if you want to," she added quickly. "Not because you feel obligated." Dante squeezed her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I loved her," he said quietly. "She was my first love, my partner, my best friend. But Emma, what I feel for you, it's different. Not less, just different. Isabel and I grew up together. We were kids who became adults together. You and I, we met as adults, as people who'd already been broken and put back together, wrong, and somehow we fit. I love Isabel's memory, but I'm in love with you." Emma felt tears well up, hormones making her emotional, but also just the raw honesty of his words. "What was her middle name?" she asked. "Anne," Dante said. "Isabel Anne." "What about Lily Ann?" Emma suggested. "Lily for new beginnings, Anne to honor who came before." Dante stared at her, and Emma watched emotions play across his face. "That's perfect," he finally said, his voice rough. "Lily Ann Morrison, our daughter." They sat there among the paint cans and half-eaten food, holding hands, both feeling the weight and beauty of having named their child, of having made her real in another way. Over the following weeks, as Emma's pregnancy progressed into the third trimester, they settled into a rhythm. Dante worked from home more, claiming he could be just as productive in his home office, but Emma knew he was staying close because he worried. She'd started having Braxton Hicks contractions, false labor pains that came and went, and each time Dante would go pale with fear until Emma convinced him it was normal. They took birthing classes together, sitting in a room full of couples who looked more prepared than they felt. Dante was the only one in a designer suit, Emma the only one without a wedding ring, and they both felt the silent judgment even if no one said anything. But they practiced breathing techniques and supported positions, and tried not to laugh at the awkwardness of it all. One night, lying in bed with Emma's head on Dante's chest, his hand tracing lazy circles on her very pregnant belly, Lily kicked hard enough that Dante jumped. "She's strong," he said, wonder in his voice. "She's going to be a fighter," Emma said. "She'll have to be, with us as parents." "We're going to screw up, aren't we?" Dante asked. "So many times. Constantly," Emma agreed. "But we'll love her, and we'll try, and hopefully that'll be enough." Dante was quiet for a moment. Then, "Marry me." Emma went still. "What?" "Marry me," Dante repeated, shifting so he could look at her. "I know this is all backwards. I know we did everything out of order. But Emma, I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to be a family, officially, legally, in every way that matters." Emma's heart was racing. "Dante, you don't have to marry me just because I'm pregnant." It's not about the pregnancy, Dante insisted. It's about you, about us. I want to marry you because I can't imagine my life without you in it. Because you make me brave and vulnerable and human. Because I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. But Emma hesitated. Dante, I love you too. But marriage is permanent. What if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake? What if the reality of a baby and sleepless nights and all the hard parts makes you wish you'd kept your distance? Then we'll work through it, Dante said. Together. Like we work through everything. Emma, I'm not asking you to marry me because I think it'll be easy. I'm asking because I want to promise you, officially, that I'm in this. All of it. The hard parts and the beautiful parts. And everything in between. Emma looked at his face, saw the sincerity there, the vulnerability, the hope. She thought about saying no, about protecting herself, about all the ways this could go wrong. But then she thought about the bridge they'd built, about crossing the chasm, about being brave enough to fall, because maybe, just maybe, they'd catch each other. Okay, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Dante's face lit up like sunrise, and he kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. They'd figure out the details later, the when and how and where. But for now, this was enough. The promise, the commitment, the choice to build something permanent from something that had started as impossible. As Dante's hand settled on her stomach and Lily kicked against his palm, Emma thought about how life never went according to plan. She'd never imagined her story would go like this. Pregnancy before relationship, baby before marriage, everything, backwards and upside down. But looking at Dante's face, feeling their daughter move, Emma realized that sometimes the best stories were the ones you never saw coming. Sometimes the detours led you exactly where you needed to be. They decided on a small ceremony, just immediate people, in the penthouse, with the city spread out below them like a blessing. Emma's mother flew in, still cautious, still worried, but softening when she saw Dante, saw the way he looked at her daughter, like she hung the moon. Sophie was there, Emma's roommate turned maid of honor, crying happy tears and hugging Emma so tight she worried about squishing Lily. Dante's former foster parents came, the Johnsons, an elderly couple who'd given a broken teenager a home and never expected anything in return. They looked at Dante with such pride, it made Emma's throat tight. And there was Dante's small circle of trusted friends, colleagues who'd become something more over years of working together. The ceremony was in the afternoon, golden autumn light streaming through the windows. Emma wore a simple cream dress that accommodated her very pregnant belly, her hair loose, flowers woven through it by Sophie's careful hands. No veil, no train, nothing traditional. Just her, authentically, standing in front of the man she loved. Dante wore a dark suit, but he'd foregone the tie at Emma's request, leaving his collar open, looking slightly undone in a way that made him more real, more accessible. When Emma walked toward him across that living room they'd painted together, his eyes filled with tears, and Emma heard Sophie sob behind her. They'd written their own vows, both terrified, but committed to honesty. Emma went first, her voice shaking but clear. Dante, when we met, my life had just been turned upside down by an impossible situation. I was terrified and alone, and I had no idea how I was going to survive what was coming. And then you showed up, and you were terrified too, and somehow that made it better. We've built something neither of us expected, something beautiful from something that started as a mistake. You've taught me that it's okay to be scared, that it's okay to be vulnerable, that reaching for someone even when you're afraid of falling is the bravest thing you can do. You've shown me what real love looks like, not perfect, not easy, but honest, and trying and present. I promise to keep building this bridge with you, to keep crossing the space between us, to keep choosing you every day even when it's hard. I promise to love you, to support you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. And I promise that our daughter will know her father is a man who faces his fears, who loves deeply, who never gives up. Emma's voice broke on the last words, and Dante stepped forward, taking her hands, his own shaking. When it was his turn, Dante took a breath, and Emma saw him gathering courage. Emma, 4 years ago, I lost someone I loved, and I convinced myself that was it, that I'd had my chance at love and family, and I'd lost it. I built walls so high I thought nothing could breach them. I made myself cold and distant and alone because alone felt safer than vulnerable. And then you walked into my life, pregnant with my child, through an impossible accident, and everything I'd convinced myself of started to crumble. You didn't let me hide, didn't let me stay in my tower. You challenged me and saw through me and somehow, impossibly, loved me anyway. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. Hope for a future that's worth living. Hope that I can be good at this, at loving, at being a partner, at being a father. I promise to keep showing up, to keep being honest even when it's terrifying, to keep reaching for you across any distance. I promise to love you, not despite your strength, but because of it, to support your dreams and your art and everything that makes you who you are. And I promise that our daughter will know her mother is the bravest person I've ever met, and that love isn't about perfection, but about choosing each other every day, even when it's hard. The officiant pronounced them married, and when Dante kissed Emma, it was tender and desperate and full of promise. Their small gathering erupted in applause, and Emma laughed through tears, and for a moment, everything was perfect. The reception was simple, catered food and champagne that Emma couldn't drink, but toasted with sparkling cider instead. There was music and laughter and stories shared. Emma's mother pulled her aside at one point, taking her hands. I was worried, her mother admitted. When you called to tell me about the pregnancy, about the circumstances, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. But seeing you with him, seeing how he looks at you, I think maybe this impossible situation led you exactly where you needed to be. Maybe, Emma agreed. Or maybe we just decided to make the best of it. Either way, I'm happy. Her mother hugged her, tight, and Emma felt years of tension and misunderstanding begin to ease. As the evening wore on and guests began to leave, Emma found herself on the balcony, looking out at the city lights, one hand on her very pregnant stomach. Dante joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands covering hers. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Happy," Emma said, terrified, excited. All of it. "Me too," Dante admitted. "I keep thinking about when Lily gets here, about holding her for the first time, about what kind of father I'll be." "You'll be a good father," Emma said with certainty, "because you care enough to worry about it." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, feeling their daughter move between them. In 3 weeks, Emma would go into labor, earlier than expected, in the middle of the night. They'd rush to the hospital, both terrified, holding hands through every contraction, every push, every moment of fear and pain and overwhelming intensity. Dante would cry when Lily was born, would hold his daughter with shaking hands, and look at her like she was a miracle, like she'd saved him. And maybe she had. Maybe they'd saved each other. But in that moment on the balcony, newly married, Emma didn't know about the birth complications that would make those hours terrifying, didn't know about the sleepless nights and the struggles and the moments they'd both feel inadequate and lost. She just knew that she loved this man, that they'd built something real from something impossible, that whatever came next, they'd face it together. "Do you ever think about how this happened?" Emma asked. "How a medical mistake led to all of this?" "All the time," Dante said. "And I know I should be angry about the violation, about the choice taken from both of us. And part of me is. But mostly, I'm just grateful. Grateful that something impossible brought you into my life." Emma turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I'm grateful too. Even though it's been hard and scary and nothing like I planned, I wouldn't change it. Wouldn't change you. Wouldn't change us." Dante kissed her forehead, tender, reverent. "I love you, Emma Morrison." "I love you too," Emma said, and the name felt right, felt real, felt like home. They went inside eventually, said goodbye to the last guests, cleaned up the remnants of celebration. And that night, lying in bed as husband and wife, Dante's hand on Emma's stomach, they talked about the future, about Lily's arrival, about sleepless nights and first smiles and all the milestones to come, about Emma's art career and Dante's company and how they'd balance everything, about buying a house someday with a yard and space for Lily to play, about maybe, eventually, having more children, deliberately this time, chosen. But mostly they talked about how grateful they were to have found each other, to have built this bridge, to have been brave enough to cross. The space between them had closed, the chasm had been bridged, and now they stood together on solid ground, ready for whatever came next. 3 weeks later, when labor started at 2 in the morning, Emma was terrified. The contractions were intense, coming faster than expected, and the drive to the hospital felt eternal. Dante held her hand, his face pale but determined, and Emma saw her own fear reflected in his eyes. But she also saw something else. Love. Commitment. The absolute certainty that he wouldn't leave, wouldn't run, wouldn't let her face this alone. At the hospital, as they prepped Emma for delivery, a doctor mentioned possible complications. Lily's heart rate was elevated, and they might need to intervene. Emma saw Dante's face go white, saw the old fear resurface, the terror of loss. She grabbed his hand, squeezing hard. "Don't leave me," she said. "Not just about the room, but about everything. About the fear and the uncertainty, and the possibility that something could go wrong." "Never," Dante promised, and he stayed right beside her, breathing with her through contractions, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her she was strong, she was brave, she was doing perfectly. When the doctor said they needed to prep for an emergency C-section, Emma saw Dante's hands shake as he suited up in scrubs. She was terrified too, but she looked at him and saw that they were in this together, truly together, and somehow that made it bearable. The surgery was fast, efficient, and then there was crying, loud and healthy and perfect. "She's here," someone said. "Your daughter's here." Through the tears blurring her vision, Emma saw Dante holding Lily for the first time. She was tiny, red-faced, furious at being born, and absolutely perfect. Dante was crying openly, looking at their daughter like she was the most precious thing in the universe. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Emma, she's so beautiful." They brought Lily to Emma, placed her on her chest, and Emma felt her world realign. This was her daughter. This tiny person who existed because of an impossible accident, because of a medical mistake, because of a series of chances and choices that had led them here. Lily Ann Morrison. Their daughter. Their family. Later, after they'd been moved to a recovery room, after family had visited and left, after it was just the 3 of them in the quiet of early morning, Dante sat beside Emma's bed holding Lily, and Emma watched them with a full heart. "I never thought I'd have this," Dante said softly, his voice thick with emotion. A family. People to love who love me back. People who stay. We're staying, Emma said. We're not going anywhere. Lily yawned, a tiny, perfect yawn, and both Emma and Dante laughed, the sound soft and full of wonder. They'd crossed the chasm, built their bridge, and now they had this perfect, impossible, beautiful life they'd created together. And it was enough. It was everything. The first week home with Lily was chaos. Beautiful, terrifying, exhausting chaos. Neither Emma nor Dante had any idea what they were doing. They'd read the books, taken the classes, prepared as much as possible, but nothing prepared you for the reality of a tiny human who needed everything from you and communicated exclusively through crying. Emma was recovering from the C-section, moving carefully, the incision healing, but still painful. Dante was terrified of breaking Lily, of holding her wrong, of doing any of the 1,000 things that could go wrong. They took turns with night feedings, both stumbling through the apartment like zombies, barely coherent. One night, at 3 a.m, Emma found Dante sitting in the nursery rocking chair, shirtless, with Lily asleep on his chest, both of them breathing in sync. Emma stood in the doorway, watching, her heart so full it hurt. He looked up, saw her, and smiled. That exhausted, delirious smile of new parents who were running on no sleep and pure love. "She won't sleep in her crib," Dante whispered. "Only on me. Skin to skin seems to help." Emma crossed the room, sitting on the ottoman in front of them. "You're doing great," she said. "We're surviving," Dante corrected. "Barely." But they were doing more than surviving. They were learning. Learning Lily's different cries, the hungry cry versus the tired cry versus the uncomfortable cry. Learning how to change diapers in under a minute, how to swaddle tight enough to calm her, but loose enough to be safe. Learning that sometimes the best thing to do was just hold her, walk with her, sing to her, even when your voice was rough from exhaustion. Emma's mother stayed for 2 weeks, helping with cooking and cleaning, and giving them breaks to shower and sleep. Sophie came by almost daily, holding Lily so Emma could paint, maintaining that tiny thread of identity beyond motherhood that Emma desperately needed. And Dante, who'd been so afraid of failing, was a revelation. He was patient and tender and completely devoted. He'd work from home when possible, taking conference calls with Lily sleeping in a carrier against his chest. He'd cook dinner one-handed while holding their daughter. He'd get up in the middle of the night without complaint, changing diapers and warming bottles and walking laps around the apartment when Lily wouldn't settle. One evening, when Lily was 6 weeks old, Emma came out of the shower to find Dante sitting on the bed, Lily in his lap, talking to her. "And I know you can't understand me yet," he was saying, his voice soft, "but I need you to know some things. Your mom is the strongest person in the world. She's brave and talented, and she chose to keep you even when it was terrifying. You're so lucky to have her. And his voice cracked, I'm going to try every day to be worthy of you both, to be the kind of father you deserve." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She stood there, eavesdropping on this private moment, and fell in love with Dante all over again. He looked up, saw her, and blushed. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough," Emma said, crossing to them. "Dante, you are worthy of us. You already are." Lily chose that moment to spit up all over Dante's shirt, and they both laughed, the moment broken, but the sentiment remaining. The weeks turned into months. Lily grew, changed, became more aware of her surroundings. She started smiling at 8 weeks, real social smiles that made all the sleepless nights worth it. She found her hands at 3 months, staring at them like they were the most fascinating things in the world. And at 4 months, she laughed for the first time, a real belly laugh at something silly Dante did. and they both nearly cried from joy. Emma started painting again, setting up an easel in the corner of the living room where she could work while Lily napped nearby. Her art had changed, become softer, more hopeful. She painted mothers and babies, connections and bridges, the space between no longer lonely, but filled with love. A gallery wanted to feature her new work, a solo show scheduled for when Lily was 6 months old. Dante had gradually returned to working at the office more, but he came home for lunch every day, wanting those extra moments with his family. They'd settle into a routine of sorts, though routine with a baby was always flexible, always adapting. One Saturday afternoon, when Lily was 5 months old, they took her to the park. It was early spring, the city coming alive with color and warmth. Emma pushed the stroller while Dante walked beside them, his hand on her lower back, that casual touch that said, "You're mine. We're together. We're family." They stopped at a bench overlooking a pond, and Dante lifted Lily from the stroller, holding her so she could see the ducks. "Look, sweetheart," he said, pointing. "See the ducks?" Emma watched them, father and daughter, and felt overwhelming gratitude. A year ago, she'd been alone and terrified, facing an impossible situation with no idea how to proceed. Now she had this family, this love, this life she never could have imagined. "Do you ever think about how different things would be?" Emma asked, "if the mistake hadn't happened?" Dante looked at her, shifting Lily to one arm so he could take Emma's hand with the other. "All the time," he admitted. "And I know it was wrong. The violation, the lack of consent. We have every right to be angry about it. We were both hurt by it. But Emma, if I could go back and prevent it, knowing what I know now, I don't think I would." Emma understood. "I wouldn't either," she said. "I should want to, should wish for a different path. But this path led me to you, to Lily, to a family I never expected, but desperately needed." They sat there in the park, the three of them, watching ducks and feeling the sun and being present in a moment of perfect, ordinary happiness. Life wasn't perfect. There were still hard days, moments of frustration and exhaustion and doubt. Emma still worried about money, about her career, about whether she was doing enough. Dante still sometimes woke from nightmares, about loss, about his past, about the possibility of everything falling apart. But they'd learned to talk about those fears, to hold each other through the dark moments, to remind each other that they were in this together. That night, after Lily was asleep in her crib, Emma and Dante lay in bed talking, something they'd made a point of doing every night, maintaining their connection even through the chaos of new parenthood. "I love our life," Emma said. "It's messier than I imagined, more exhausting, more uncertain, but also so much fuller, so much more real." Dante pulled her closer, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her arm. "I never thought I'd be happy again," he admitted. "After Isabel died, I convinced myself happiness was in my past, that I'd had my chance and lost it." Emma propped herself up on an elbow, looking down at him. "And now?" "Now I realize you can have more than one chance at happiness," Dante said. "It looks different, feels different, but it's real, and it's mine, and I'm so grateful for it." They made love that night, tender and slow, rediscovering each other after months of exhaustion and focus on Lily. It was different from before, this intimacy, deeper, rooted not just in attraction but in shared experience, shared struggle, shared joy. They were partners now in the truest sense. The next morning, Emma woke to find Dante already up, feeding Lily her bottle in the living room, morning light streaming through the windows. She stood in the doorway watching them. This man who'd been so afraid to be a father, proving every day that he was exactly the father Lily needed. He looked up, saw her, and smiled. "Coffee's ready," he said, "and there's breakfast." "You didn't have to do that," Emma said, but she was grateful. He'd made her favorite, French toast and fruit, and she ate while he finished feeding Lily. "I have a meeting at the office this morning," Dante said, "but I should be back by 1. Sophie's coming to help you set up for the gallery show, right?" Emma nodded. The show was in 2 weeks, her first solo exhibition, and she was terrified and excited in equal measure. "I'll be there opening night," Dante said. "Front row. Lily too, if we can swing it. She's your biggest fan." Emma laughed. "She's 5 months old. She has no idea what art is." "She knows her mom is talented and amazing," Dante countered. "That's enough." After he left for work, Emma spent the morning with Lily, playing on the floor with soft toys, reading board books, singing silly songs. These moments, mundane and ordinary, were also precious. She'd learned to find joy in the small things, to appreciate the present rather than constantly worrying about the future. Sophie arrived at noon, bursting with energy and opinions about the gallery layout. They spread out Emma's paintings, discussing arrangement and flow while Lily napped. When Lily woke, Sophie held her, cooing and making faces, and Emma felt grateful for a friend who'd become family. The gallery show was a success. More people came than Emma had expected, including several critics who'd begun following her work. She sold 8 paintings, enough to contribute meaningfully to their household, to feel like she was building something sustainable. Dante was there the whole evening, Lily sleeping in a carrier against his chest, looking proud every time someone complimented Emma's work. "This is just the beginning," he told her, as they drove home. "You're going to be huge." "I just want to be good," Emma said. "Want to create work that matters." "You already do," Dante said. Life settled into a new normal over the following months. Lily grew and changed, hitting milestones that amazed them. First foods at 6 months, sitting up at 7, crawling at 8. She was curious and determined, already showing personality traits that were uniquely hers. Emma continued painting, building her career slowly but surely. Dante's company launched a new product that was wildly successful, securing their financial future. But more than any professional success, what mattered was the family they'd built, the life they'd created together. When Lily turned 1, they threw a party in the park where they'd spent so many afternoons. Friends and family gathered, and Emma's mother baked the cake, a tradition she insisted on. Lily was fascinated by the whole affair, especially the smashing of said cake all over her face and high chair. Emma took photos, wanting to capture every moment, this milestone that marked a year of survival and growth and love. Later, after everyone had left, and they were cleaning up, Dante pulled Emma aside. "I have something for you," he said. "It's not Lily's birthday," Emma pointed out. "No, but it's the anniversary of when our lives changed," Dante said. "A year ago, we were terrified new parents with no idea what we were doing. We've made it a year. That deserves celebrating." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Emma's heart jumped. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver with a small pendant. It had 3 overlapping circles, intertwined. "It represents us," Dante explained. "You, me, and Lily. Connected. Family." Emma felt tears well up. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He fastened it around her neck, and she touched the pendant, feeling the weight of its meaning. "I'm proud of us," Dante said. "Of what we've built. I'm proud of us, too," Emma agreed. They loaded a sleeping Lily into her car seat and drove home, the city lights beautiful around them. And Emma thought about how far they'd come, how much they'd changed. A year and a half ago, she'd been sitting in a doctor's office, hearing impossible words, alone and terrified. Now she had a husband who loved her, a daughter who brought joy to every day, a career that was flourishing. She had family. The drive home was quiet, comfortable, the easy silence of people who knew each other deeply. At home, they put Lily in her crib, both standing there for a moment watching her sleep. This miracle baby who'd changed everything. In the hallway, Dante pulled Emma close, kissing her forehead, her temples, her lips. "I love you," he said, "more than I knew it was possible to love someone." Emma wrapped her arms around his neck. "I love you too," she said. "Thank you for taking a chance on us. Thank you for being brave." "We were brave together," Dante said. "That's what made it possible." They went to bed that night wrapped around each other, and Emma fell asleep feeling safe, loved, complete. The future was still uncertain, would always be uncertain. But she'd learned that uncertainty didn't have to be terrifying. It could be exciting, full of possibility, because she wasn't facing it alone anymore. Over the next year, life continued its beautiful, messy progression. Lily started walking at 13 months, creating a whole new level of chaos as she toddled around the penthouse getting into everything. She said her first word at 14 months, "Dada," which made Dante cry happy tears. Mama came 2 weeks later, and Emma pretended not to be slightly hurt that she was second. They celebrated holidays, created traditions. Christmas with Emma's mother, Thanksgiving with the Johnsons. Summer trips to the beach where Lily discovered sand and hated it, screaming until they washed her off. Quiet family dinners where they'd look at each other over Lily's head and smile, sharing in the joy and chaos of parenthood. Emma had another gallery show, this one even more successful. She was offered a commission for a corporate office, her biggest professional achievement yet. Dante's company went public, making headlines, but he came home that evening wanting only to hold his daughter and kiss his wife. The success was nice, but it wasn't what mattered. What mattered was family. When Lily was 18 months old, Emma found out she was pregnant again. This time, it was planned, chosen, a decision they'd made together. She took the test one morning while Lily was napping, and Dante was in his home office. She walked in, test in hand, and Dante looked up from his computer. His eyes went to what she was holding, and understanding dawned. "Really?" he asked, his voice hushed. "Really," Emma confirmed. "We're having another baby." Dante stood, crossed to her, picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, his hands immediately went to her stomach, even though there was nothing to feel yet. "Another one," he said, wonder in his voice. A sibling for Lily. Emma leaned into him. "Are you happy?" "I'm terrified," Dante admitted. "But yes." "So happy." "Me too," Emma said. This pregnancy was different from the first. There was no shock, no adjustment period to the idea. They knew what was coming. The sleepless nights and exhaustion and overwhelming love. They were ready. Or as ready as anyone could be. But they were also busier now, with Lily to care for, careers to manage, a life that was fuller and more complex. Emma's morning sickness was worse this time, made harder by having to chase a toddler. Dante took over more of Lily's care, getting up with her in the morning, handling bedtime, giving Emma space to rest and recover. They told Lily she was going to be a big sister, though at 18 months, she had no idea what that meant. She just nodded solemnly and went back to playing with her blocks. The pregnancy progressed normally. Another girl, they found out at the anatomy scan. Lily would have a sister. They decided to name her Rose, continuing the flower theme. Rose Marie Morrison, Marie for Emma's mother, who'd grown softer and more present over the past 2 years. They prepared Lily as much as possible, reading her books about being a big sister, letting her feel Emma's growing stomach. But nothing could truly prepare a toddler for the upheaval of a new baby. Rose was born in the spring, Another beautiful girl, with Dante's dark eyes and Emma's nose. The birth was easier this time, a planned C-section with no complications. Dante held Lily in the hospital room when they brought Rose over to meet her. She looked at her new sister with confusion, then interest, then reached out one chubby finger to touch Rose's tiny hand. "Baby," Lily said, one of her growing vocabulary words. "Your sister," Emma said. "Rose." "Dose," Lily attempted, unable to quite make the R sound. Close enough. The adjustment to 2 children was harder than Emma had anticipated. Lily was jealous, acting out, needing constant reassurance that she was still loved. Rose was colicky, crying for hours every evening. Emma was exhausted, recovering from surgery while caring for 2 children under 2. Dante did everything he could, but he still had to work, had responsibilities. There were moments, dark moments, at 3 in the morning with both girls crying, when Emma wondered if they'd made a mistake, if they'd taken on too much, if she was failing. But then the morning would come, and Lily would kiss Rose's head, or Dante would hold both girls at once, or Emma's mother would show up with food and help, and she'd remember why they'd done this. Family was hard, was chaos, was overwhelming, but it was also worth it. Over time, they found their rhythm. Lily adjusted to being a big sister, started being gentle with Rose, protective even. Rose's colic ended, and she became a happy, smiley baby. Emma started painting again, finding time in small, stolen moments. Dante proposed working 4 days a week so he could be more present. They were making it work. One evening, when Rose was 4 months old and Lily was 2, Emma stood in the doorway of the living room watching her family. Dante was on the floor with both girls, making silly faces that made Lily giggle and Rose coo. The apartment was messy, toys everywhere, evidence of life being lived fully. And Emma felt overwhelming gratitude. This life, chaotic and imperfect as it was exactly what she'd needed. She'd spent so long being careful, being cautious, protecting herself. And then fate, or medical error, or chance, had forced her into something she'd never have chosen. And it had given her everything. Dante looked up, saw her watching, and smiled. That smile that still made her heart skip, that said she was his home, his anchor, his love. "Come join us," he said, holding out a hand. Emma crossed the room, settled on the floor with her family, and Lily immediately climbed into her lap. Rose was content in Dante's arms, and they sat there together, the 4 of them, being present in a moment of perfect, ordinary chaos. "We did good," Emma said quietly. "Yeah," Dante agreed. "We did. They'd built this together, this family, this life, started from impossibility and created something beautiful. And yes, there would be hard days ahead, challenges and struggles, and moments of doubt. But there would also be joy and laughter and love. So much love." That night, after both girls were asleep, Emma and Dante stood in the nursery doorway looking at Rose in her crib, then walked down the hall to check on Lily. 2 daughters. 2 miracles in their own ways. 5 years passed in what felt like a blink, but also an eternity. The way time moves when you're raising children, each day stretching endlessly while years slip by unnoticed. Lily was 6 now, in 1st grade, already reading above her level and showing an artistic talent that made Emma's heart swell with pride. She'd paint for hours if they let her, creating wild, colorful abstracts that Emma framed and hung throughout the house. Rose was 4, about to start pre-kindergarten, and she was quieter than her sister, more cautious, but with a fierce determination that showed in everything she did. She built elaborate block towers and refused help, insisting on doing things herself. Emma's career had flourished in ways she'd never imagined. She had gallery representation now, her work shown in major cities. She'd published a coffee table book of her paintings, and it had done surprisingly well. She taught occasional workshops, sharing her process with other artists. But her favorite work remained the paintings she did for her family, the portraits of her daughters that captured who they were in each moment. Dante's company had become one of the biggest tech firms in the country. He'd taken it public, made more money than they could spend in several lifetimes. But success hadn't changed him, not in the ways that mattered. He still made pancakes on Saturday mornings, still read bedtime stories with funny voices, still looked at Emma like she was the most important person in his world. They'd bought a house eventually, needing more space than the penthouse could provide. It was in a family neighborhood, with a yard where the girls could play and a separate studio for Emma's painting. Dante had renovated the garage into a workshop for himself, picking up woodworking as a hobby, creating furniture and toys for their daughters. They'd settled into the kind of life neither had imagined, but both cherished. One evening, after putting the girls to bed, Emma and Dante sat on their back porch with wine, watching the stars emerge. The girls had been particularly energetic that day, Lily practicing a piano piece over and over, Rose insisting on helping make dinner, which meant flour everywhere. But now the house was quiet, peaceful. "Can you believe it's been almost 7 years?" Emma asked. "Since that first appointment, since everything changed." Dante took her hand, their fingers interlacing automatically. "Feels like yesterday, and like forever ago at the same time." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. "Would you change anything?" she asked. "If you could go back?" Dante was quiet, considering. "No," he said finally. "Not the outcome. But I wish we'd had choice, wish it hadn't been forced on us, that we'd been given the opportunity to decide." "I know," Emma said. "I think about that sometimes, about how violated we both were, how our autonomy was taken. We have every right to be angry about that." "We are angry about it," Dante agreed. "But we've also built something beautiful from it. Those things can both be true." They sat in comfortable silence, years of partnership making words unnecessary sometimes. Emma thought about the lawsuit they'd filed against the hospital, the settlement they'd won, substantial, but never enough to compensate for the violation. They'd donated most of it to patient advocacy groups, wanting something good to come from what had happened to them. "Tomorrow's the fundraiser," Dante said. "Are you ready?" Emma nodded. They'd started a foundation years ago, focused on medical ethics and patient rights. They held an annual fundraiser, and this year it was particularly significant. They'd invited the head of the hospital, the doctors involved in the original mistake, everyone who'd been part of that catastrophic error 7 years ago. Emma had been nervous about it, about seeing those people again, about confronting the past so directly. But Dante had convinced her it was important, a way to close that chapter fully. The fundraiser was held in a beautiful hotel ballroom, hundreds of people in attendance. Emma wore a green gown that made her feel powerful, confident. Dante was handsome in his tuxedo, and they moved through the crowd together, thanking donors, sharing their mission. When it came time for speeches, Emma and Dante took the stage together, the way they did everything. "7 years ago," Emma began, her voice clear and strong. "I went in for a routine medical procedure. I came out pregnant, through no choice or consent of my own. It was a violation that changed my life irrevocably." The crowd was silent, attentive. "Beside me is Dante Morrison," Emma continued. "His genetic material was used without his knowledge or permission. He too was violated, his bodily autonomy taken, his choices removed. The medical establishment failed us both." Dante stepped forward. "What happened to us should never happen to anyone," he said. "The layers of failures required for such an error are staggering. And while we've built a beautiful life from those circumstances, that doesn't excuse what was done to us, It doesn't make it acceptable. Emma took over again. That's why we started this foundation. To advocate for stronger patient protections, better medical protocols, accountability when errors occur. To ensure that what happened to us never happens to anyone else. The speech went on, but Emma found her eyes drifting to where her mother sat, holding Lily and Rose, who'd been allowed to attend for the first half of the evening. Her daughters, beautiful and bright, and loved beyond measure. They were the silver lining in a dark cloud, the good that had come from harm. After the speeches, during the reception, Dr. Martinez approached them. She was older now, grayer, and her eyes held years of guilt. Mr. Morrison, Miss Carter, Mrs. Morrison, she began, her voice shaking. I need to apologize. What happened under my care was inexcusable. I've spent 7 years living with that mistake, knowing I violated your trust and autonomy in the most fundamental way. Emma and Dante exchanged a glance. They'd discussed this possibility, what they'd say if they saw the people responsible. We appreciate that, Emma said carefully. And we hope the protocols have changed, that this can never happen again. They have, Dr. Martinez said quickly, extensively. Multiple levels of verification, completely overhauled systems. But that doesn't undo what I did to you. No, it doesn't, Dante agreed. But we've made peace with it, found a way to live with it. We hope you can do the same. The doctor nodded, tears in her eyes, and moved away. Emma let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That was hard, she said. But necessary, Dante replied. They needed to know we're not destroyed by what they did, that we found our way despite them. The evening wound down, and they collected their daughters, who were tired but excited from the fancy party. In the car on the way home, Lily asked, Mama, why was tonight important? Emma turned in her seat to look at her daughter. Because sometimes bad things happen, but we can choose what we do with them. We can let them destroy us, or we can use them to help others. Like making lemonade from lemons? Lily asked, and Emma laughed. Exactly like that, sweetheart. At home, they got the girls ready for bed together, the familiar routine comforting. After both were asleep, Emma and Dante returned to their own room, exhausted but satisfied. That went better than I expected, Dante said, pulling Emma into his arms. We did good tonight, Emma agreed. They made love that night, tender and familiar, the ease of long partnership. And afterward, lying in the dark, Emma thought about how far they'd come. From terrified strangers connected by accident to partners in every sense, parents to 2 beautiful children, advocates for change. Thank you, Emma said into the darkness. For what? Dante asked, his hand tracing patterns on her back. For not running, Emma said. That first day in your office, you could have just thrown money at the situation and disappeared. Thank you for staying. Thank you for giving us a chance. Dante pulled her closer. Thank you for letting me, he said, for seeing past my fear and anger to what I could be, for believing I could be a good father when I didn't believe it myself. They'd given each other that permission to be flawed and scared and still worthy of love. Permission to build something beautiful from something broken. The next morning was Saturday, and they woke to Lily and Rose jumping on their bed, demanding pancakes. Dante groaned dramatically, making the girls giggle, but got up to start breakfast. Emma followed, and they cooked together while the girls colored at the kitchen table. This, Emma thought, watching her family, this ordinary, beautiful morning, this was what happiness looked like. Not perfect, not without challenge, but real and full and precious. Later, Dante took the girls to the park while Emma painted in her studio. She was working on a new piece, her largest yet. It showed two figures no longer on opposite sides of a chasm, but standing together, hands clasped, facing forward toward a horizon full of light and possibility. Behind them was the bridge they'd built, strong and permanent. Beside them were two smaller figures, children holding their hands. Family. Connection. The space between closed. When she stepped back to assess her progress, Emma felt satisfied. This piece would be in her next show, the centerpiece, a visual representation of their journey, their story, their triumph. That evening, all four of them went for ice cream, a weekend tradition. They sat at an outdoor table, the girls making messes with their cones, and Emma looked at Dante. He was wiping chocolate ice cream off Rose's face, while simultaneously preventing Lily from eating all her toppings first, and he looked harried and happy and completely in his element. He caught her looking and smiled, that smile that still made her heart skip after all these years. "What?" he asked. "Nothing," Emma said. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "We," Dante corrected. "How lucky we are." Emma nodded, taking Rose's napkin to help with the chocolate situation. "Yes, how lucky we are." 10 years had passed since that impossible day in the doctor's office when Emma's life had fractured and reformed into something unrecognizable. Now, standing in her home studio surrounded by paintings for her retrospective exhibition, she barely recognized the terrified girl she'd been. Lily was 11 now, already showing the kind of talent that made teachers talk about art school and futures bright with possibility. She was thoughtful and creative, spending hours sketching in notebooks she kept private, sharing only when she was ready. Emma respected that, understood the need to create in solitude before revealing yourself to the world. Rose was 9, and she'd found her passion in music, particularly the piano. She practiced with a dedication that reminded Emma of Dante's work ethic, determined to master every piece she attempted. The house was often filled with imperfect renditions of classical music, and Emma loved every slightly off-key note. Dante had stepped back from day-to-day operations of his company, transitioning to more of an advisory role. He wanted time, he'd said. Time with Emma and the girls, while they were still young enough to want his attention. Time to pursue his own interests, his woodworking, the mentorship program he'd started for kids aging out of foster care, giving them the support he'd once desperately needed. Emma's career had reached heights she'd never imagined possible. Her work hung in museums now, her name recognized in art circles. But her favorite pieces remained the personal ones, the paintings of her family, the visual diary of their life together. The retrospective was titled Crossing, and it traced her artistic journey from the dark, lonely paintings of her early 20s to the vibrant family portraits of recent years. The opening was tomorrow night, and Emma was nervous in a way she hadn't been in years. This wasn't just a show of her work, but a public acknowledgement of her story, their story. The wall text would explain everything: the medical error, the impossible pregnancy, the family built from violation and choice, and love. Some people would judge, would find it scandalous or inappropriate or too personal. Emma had made peace with that. Her story was hers to tell, and she was choosing to tell it fully, honestly, without shame. That evening, the whole family sat together at dinner, a tradition they'd maintained no matter how busy life got. Lily was talking about a writing project at school. Rose was demonstrating a new piano technique using her fork as keys, and Dante was listening to both with patient amusement. "Girls," Emma said, getting their attention. "Tomorrow's my gallery opening. It's going to be different from the other ones you've been to." "Different how?" Lily asked, immediately curious. Emma and Dante exchanged a glance. They'd talked to the girls about their origin story, age-appropriately, over the years. They knew they'd been born from a medical mistake, that Mommy and Daddy had fallen in love while figuring out the confusing situation. But tomorrow would be more public, more exposed. The paintings are going to tell our whole story, Emma explained. About how you came to be, about the mistake that led to us becoming a family. Some people might ask questions. Some people might not understand. Do you want us to come? Rose asked, her voice small. Emma smiled, reaching for her daughter's hand. Of course I want you there. You're the most important part of the story. I just wanted you to know what to expect. I think it's brave, Lily said with the serious wisdom of an 11-year-old. Not everyone would tell the truth like that. Dante looked at Emma with pride and love clear in his eyes. Your mother, he said, is the bravest person I know. The opening was packed, standing room only. Emma stood beside Dante, their daughters between them, and watched as people moved through the gallery, following her artistic journey. The early paintings, dark and isolated. The middle period, showing two figures beginning to reach for each other. The later work, vibrant and full of life and family and joy. At the center of the largest wall hung her newest piece, the one she'd been working on for months. It showed their family of 4, not perfect, not idealized, but real. Lily with paint on her hands, Rose with sheet music tucked under her arm, Dante with sawdust in his hair, Emma with a baby bump visible under her shirt. Because 2 months ago they'd found out they were expecting again. A surprise this time, unplanned, but wanted. A son, they'd learned just last week. They hadn't told the girls yet, weren't quite ready to share with the world. But Emma had painted it, unable to help herself, needing to capture this moment of anticipation and joy. Throughout the evening, people approached them. Some with congratulations on Emma's success, others with questions about their story. Emma answered honestly, Dante beside her, supporting, supplementing, being her partner in all things. Near the end of the evening, Dr. Martinez appeared. Emma hadn't seen her in years, not since the fundraiser 5 years ago. She was fully retired now, she explained, but she'd seen the publicity about the show and needed to come. I wanted to say, Dr. Martinez began, her voice thick with emotion, that what you've done with your pain, turning it into art and advocacy and this beautiful family, it's remarkable. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it matters that something good came from something so wrong. Emma felt Dante's hand tighten on hers. Thank you, she said. We've made peace with it. Found a way to let it be part of our story without letting it define us. After the doctor left, Emma leaned into Dante, suddenly exhausted. Ready to go home? He asked. She nodded, and they gathered their daughters, said goodbyes to gallery staff, and walked out into the cool evening air. In the car, both girls fell asleep almost immediately, the excitement of the evening catching up with them. Emma looked at Dante as he drove, this man who'd been a terrified stranger and became her everything. We did good, she said softly. Yeah, Dante agreed. We did. They'd taken an impossible situation, a violation that should have destroyed them, and built something beautiful. Not despite what happened, but incorporating it, letting it be part of their story without letting it be the whole story. Emma's hand moved to her stomach, to the new life growing there, this son who was wanted and chosen and already loved. Their family growing again, in the right way this time, through choice and love and readiness. Tomorrow they'd tell the girls. Tomorrow they'd start preparing for another edition, another chapter. But tonight, driving through the city with her sleeping daughters in the back seat and her husband beside her, Emma just felt grateful. Grateful for the medical error that had brought them together. Grateful for the choice to keep Lily despite everything. Grateful for Dante's courage in letting down his walls. Grateful for Rose, for this new baby, for every moment of chaos and joy and overwhelming love. The space between had been bridged, the chasm crossed, and on the other side was family, was home, was everything she'd ever needed, but never known how to find. Sometimes the best things in life came from the worst mistakes. Sometimes the detours led you exactly where you were meant to be. Sometimes love wasn't perfect, or planned, or chosen in conventional ways. Sometimes it was born from impossibility and grew into something more real and precious than anything you'd imagined. Emma closed her eyes, Dante's hand finding hers across the console, and let herself be present in this moment, this imperfect, beautiful, impossible life they'd built together. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she wouldn't change a single thing. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, also click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.